Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick video to kind of show you the different types of joints. I don't necessarily think that it's a difficult thing to remember, but I think it will help a lot to see the different joints and be able to, put context with those joints. So there are actually 12 different types of joints that the book goes through, and we're going to go through all of those. So one of the types of joints is the synatosis, joint, and that is one that we actually don't have in our bodies as adults. So we all know that, hopefully we know that a newborn has more bones in their body than a grown adult does. And so what happens is this type of joint, this synatosis joint, is actually two bones that have fused together. So one example is the maxilla. In a newborn, this half of the maxilla is considered one bone and this half is the other. And over time, they fuse together in this area. And now it's one bone as an adult. And if you look at the skull, you actually can't see any of the any fusing of that bone. Now, so that is what we call the bony joint. That's kind of the layman's terms for it, or the synatosis. Another type is a suture, and a suture is an immobile joint. And these are only found in the skull, and you can see them on this skull here. Hopefully you can see that. So you've got, excuse my eye itches. This kind of suture right here. You've got one between the two parietal bones. You've got this coronal suture here that is between the frontal and the parietals. You've got them between the occipital and the parietals. There it is. So this right here. The temporals, not quite as jagged. It's actually a different type of suture. If you can see that on here or not, kind of right here, this way. And there's also the suture between the hard palate here on your mouth. So those are only found in the skull, and it's a type of fibrous joint. Another type of fibrous joint is the gymphosis joint, and that is the one that holds your teeth in the socket. So you've got tendons that keep the teeth in the socket, but they allow for a little bit of movement because that's what allows you to know and sense that you're chewing, and actually to allow you to sense when you have stuff stuck between your teeth, which is pretty important. All right, and then you've got the syndesmosis, and essentially what this is some fibers. Let me take you on a little trip here and introduce you to Fred, my classroom skeleton. The kids named him Fred. So this type of joint is fibers that would connect, like the radius and the ulna right here. They would actually run. I can't show sideways. They would actually run between the two bones to kind of keep them in place, and also between the tibia and the fibula down here on the leg. Okay, so that is the syndesmosis joint, and all of those suture, gymphosis, and syndesmosis are all fibrous joints. And then you have the cartilage joints or cartilaginous joints. And there are two types you have in the body. One is called the synchondrosis. And this is bones that are bound by hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage is the important part. And on the video on bone development, I talked about the epiphyseal line in developing bone. So this obviously is a grown adult bone, but as a younger individual, this kind of section right here would be all cartilage. And so this synchondrosis joint is the joint between the head of the femur, or actually the head of the femur and the rest of the femur. Over time that closes and you end up with this epiphyseal line right here. So the growth was within this line right here. And the last one is called the symphysis joint. And one of the places you find it, there's two, is in the pubic symphysis. So if you go back over to Fred here, you can see where between the two hip bones, the coxal bones, there's this piece of cartilage. This is fibrocartilage instead of hyaline cartilage. And this is what expands when someone's giving birth. And then also between the vertebrae. So these intervertebral discs right here are also made of fibrocartilage. This would be a symphysis joint as well. All right, and so those are the types of joints, three of them. The last type of joint is a synovial joint, and that is the joint that allows for the most movement. And there are 6 types of those, so I'm going to show you those now. So the first one is called a ball and socket joint. Okay, so this is one hip bone, one side, and then the femur bone here. So the ball and socket is referring to the ball at the head of the femur and the socket that is in the hip. Okay, and this allows for this kind of movement And essentially it's a movement along many axes. So they call that a multi-axial joint. Okay, so it allows for multiple movements. So you have this in the leg, and when it attaches to your hip, and you also get it, I didn't take these bones out, so we'll go back to Fred, in the shoulder. Okay, so it's a much smaller head. Give me that. A much smaller head here on the humerus, and it articulates with the scapula here and part of the clavicle up here. Okay, so this is a ball and socket joint. Again, it allows for this multi-axial movement that you are able to do with your shoulder. So that's a ball and socket, really a ball sitting in a socket and allows for movement. The next one is the condylar joint. And this is going to be, you find them in your hands and also in your wrist. Okay, so one of the ways where you see them is in the bottom of your finger. So these are your carpal bones here that make up this part of your hand. Sorry, these are the metacarpal bones. And then this is the first phalange bone. Okay, so the radiocarpal joint, base of fingers. Sorry, it's the end of the school day. My brain is sort of fried at this moment. These allow for two-way movement, or what we call a biaxial movement. Okay, so the way that these bones are formed allows you to move your finger this way and also side to side this way. Okay, any kind of movement in a circle is not as smooth as a ball and socket joint, and it really is a combination of moving this way or moving this way. So if you were to look at it, see if I can get a good one on here, you can kind of see kind of a concave concave on one end and a convex on the other, and they just kind of slide over each other in that way. Okay. The other example is in the radiocarpal joint. So this is where the radius joins to the carpal bone, and essentially you can see in the radius here. Hopefully you can see that. It's so bright. Kind of there's a little dip, a convex or concave indentation here, and it sits right in with the wrist. Okay, so it allows for this kind of movement and a little bit of this kind of movement here. So that's your biaxial condylar joint. All right, so the next one is going to be your saddle joint. Okay, and we also find this in the hand. It's at the base of your thumb. So it's this joint right here that allows for you to move this way, and also this way here. Okay, and this is kind of what it looks like. And I always think of a guy sitting on a horse and how the horse's back is shaped like this, and the guy takes his legs and wraps this way. Okay, so it allows for movement this way as well as in this direction here. So you can see it really well, I think, sideways here, and how this bone right here, your carpal bones, has this convex shape here, and then it concave on the other side. So again, it allows for movement in this direction, but also if I were to pull the finger out and go this way. Okay, so that would be your saddle joint. It is like a cowboy sitting on a saddle. Okay, and also the sternoclavicle joint is another one. So right here between your clavicle and then the sternum, that is your breastbone. Let me grab that. So that joint, let me get this right here. Okay, so this would sit in your body kind of like this, and then that is this side here. So that joint is, you can see it's a little bit convex here on the sternal surface, excuse me, and then it's a little bit concave here on the, it's on the wrong side of the body. No wonder it wasn't fitting. And it fits like this. So it allows for a little movement this way and also this way. So when you push open a door, you almost can feel it moving a little bit if you push something forward, and also when you lift stuff. Okay, so that's the movement that happens in that joint right there. So that is, again, the saddle joint. So the next one is your gliding or plane joint. And essentially what that means is that the bones are moving on a plane. Okay, there's no rotation that's in it. It's just gliding and moving along a flat plane. Okay, you find that within the carpal bones in the wrist. Okay, also all these little bones here move in that way. All of the tarsal bones in the ankle, so all of these bones in your foot move in that way. So again, it just kind of moves this way here. And then the other one is what happens between the vertebrae. I thought I had gotten a couple out, but I didn't. So when you move, when your back moves, it doesn't allow for much movement, but these vertebrae can kind of glide a little bit as you're rotating. Okay, so in between one single vertebrae, not a lot of movement. When you have a whole bunch of vertebrae like this, then you can start to get lots of big movements. It turns into a big movement when you have multiple movements adding up. So that's the gliding joint. Okay, again, it just kind of glides along a plane in this way. All right, and then one of the easier ones for me, I think, is the hinge joint. So I like to think of the hinge on a door that you only open on one axis. So it's a monoaxial joint. It only opens on one plane. And one of those examples is the elbow. I can only open and move my elbow this way. I can't, when I move this way, that's movement in my shoulder, not in my elbow. This elbow can only move like this. Same thing with your knees. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like in a bone. So I've got my humerus bone here. Okay, so this would sit, looks like this one in my arm. And this is the ulnar joint. So this right here is your elbow. Okay, that's this point right here. Okay, this sits like so in the joint here. Okay, so you can see where I put those two together. And the only movement that is allowed is this hinge, like a door, right here. Okay, actually, I think I've got these on the wrong elbow, but it is what it is that way. Okay, so this only a hinge. It opens just like a door. Okay, same thing with the knee. I don't have the tibia out to show, but the fibula fits right onto the tibia here and only allows for this kind of movement here. You also see that within the phalanges. So if I take the hand back out, the knuckles that we crack. So this knuckle and this knuckle here, those are just hinge joints. Okay, I can't move these joints any other way but along this axis. I can't move that finger sideways because that would look really weird. Okay, so that's a hinge joint as well. All right, and finally we have our pivot joint, also a monoaxial joint. Okay, and there are two examples of this in your body. Okay, one of them is the radio-ulnar joint, which is between the radius on the thumb side of the forearm and the ulna on the pinky side. Remember PU? Okay, so pinky ulnar. Okay, so let me get, here is my ulna, here is my radius. Actually, this is easier to see on the skeleton, so let me take you over here. Okay, this is the joint that allows you to supinate and pronate your hand. Okay, so if you look here in the elbow, it's in the elbow area. Okay, for me to twist the hand, you can see how it rotates kind of like a wheel. Okay, and you're looking at this joint right here. Okay, so that twist the hand, supinate and pronate the hand. Okay, that ulna, the radius is twisting here. So that's one axis of monoaxial movement. That's your pivot. Another example, and the last example of a pivot joint in your body is the atlas and the axis vertebrae in your neck. Okay, so the axis vertebrae is this one here, and it's got a projection here on the top called the dens. And make sure I have this assembled correctly. And then your axis, your atlas joint vertebrae, this is the very top one. This is the one that sits right up against the skull on your in your neck. Okay, when you turn your head this way, okay, from side to side, what's happening is your atlas here, this top one, is pivoting in this manner around the axis. Okay, that's your axis. When you turn your head this way, that is your skull kind of rocking in these two little impressions right here. Okay, so this is a pivot joint here. Okay, I think that's all of them. So all of those, ball and socket, condylar, saddle, the gliding or plane joint, hinge joint, and pivot joints, they are all synovial joints. The rest of them are either bony joints, fibrous joints, and cartilaginous joints. So if you guys have any questions about those, please send me an email and I will answer them as they come.